There is a particular kind of chaos that looks from a distance like an accident. Someone drops a lit match. A building catches fire. Everyone rushes around asking how this could have happened. And somewhere nearby, the person who dropped the match is looking at the sky with a very satisfied expression, because this is exactly what they wanted. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a behavior pattern. And once you see it clearly in the Middle East right now, and I mean see it clearly, not as a metaphor, but as a documented, repeated, sequential series of events, you cannot really unsee it. On Sunday, the 7th of June, 2026, Israel dropped at least 10 one-ton bombs on apartment buildings in the Dahiyeh suburb of South Beirut. Lebanon's health ministry confirmed 2 people killed, 20 wounded. The IDF described it as a strike on a Hezbollah command center. This would be a more convincing description if IDF sources hadn't immediately followed it up by suggesting the command center might have been empty. So, 10 one-ton bombs on an apartment complex that may have been unoccupied, for the purposes of a military operation whose results they are already walking back. Hours later, Iran launched a wave of ballistic missiles at northern Israel. Sirens sounded across the country. The Israeli military said most were intercepted, some were not, with impacts reported near Haifa and in the south. Trump told the Financial Times he had called Netanyahu and told him to stand down. Netanyahu, for his part, has not yet confirmed this. Of course. To understand why Sunday's strikes matter, you need to remember what happened in the 12 months before them. In June 2025, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a coordinated surprise attack on Iranian nuclear facilities at Natanz, Fordoz, and Isfahan, killing more than 30 senior IRGC commanders and 11 nuclear scientists overnight. Iran retaliated with Operation True Promise 3, firing over 570 ballistic missiles at Israel across 12 days. The United States then entered the war directly, striking Iran's fortified nuclear sites with B-2 stealth bombers in Operation Midnight Hammer. A ceasefire brokered by the United States and Qatar took effect June 24, 2025. It was supposed to hold until February 2026. It did not. In February 2026, Israel and the U.S. assassinated Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Another war started, another ceasefire, this one brokered by Pakistan in April 2026, lasted 2 weeks before the Islamabad talks collapsed and the U.S. imposed a naval blockade on Iran. And now, as of last week, a fresh U.S.-backed deal was announced, a memorandum of understanding, a 60-day ceasefire, a framework that included, critically, a condition that Israel not strike Beirut's southern suburbs. 6 days later, Israel struck Beirut's southern suburbs. There are 3 things worth knowing about the timing of Israeli strikes and diplomatic deals. I will tell you one of them in more detail than is comfortable. The first, when Hamas and Israel were in active negotiations in 2024, Israel assassinated Hamas's political leader. The second, when the United States was 5 days away from a 6th round of nuclear talks with Iran in June 2025, Israel launched its surprise air campaign. The third, and this is the one I want you to sit with, is that the Sunday strike on Dahiyeh happened 6 days after a ceasefire agreement that explicitly prohibited attacking Beirut's southern suburbs, which Iran has publicly and repeatedly identified as a red line since the beginning of this entire conflict. And the Israeli Air Force dropped 10 one-ton bombs there anyway. Now, I am not going to tell you what that pattern means, because I am not in the business of telling you what to think. What I will tell you is this. You will find it documented, time-stamped, and repeated, with a consistency that would be remarkable in any other context. Donald Trump did call Netanyahu on Sunday. The Financial Times reported the call lasted 10 to 15 minutes, noticeably shorter than their recent conversations, and that Trump told Netanyahu, the Iranians have had their strike, the Israelis have had theirs, now stop. Because a deal can be done Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Trump said he calls the shots, that Netanyahu will have no choice but to accept. I should note that Trump said approximately this in May, when Netanyahu's hair was described by one source as being on fire after a call about Lebanon, and in March, when Trump reportedly called Netanyahu, and I am quoting a U.S. official here, fucking crazy for attacking Beirut while peace talks were live. Trump confirmed that on a podcast. His exact phrasing, I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon. which is, by some distance, the most restrained description of dropping one-ton bombs into a civilian suburb during active peace negotiations that I have ever encountered. The pattern in these calls, if you're keeping track, is this. Trump gets angry. Trump makes statements about control. Netanyahu agrees on the phone. The operational picture on the ground does not change. You could set a calendar by it. Iran's response on Sunday was not primarily a military action. 591 missiles were fired at Israel during the 12-day war of 2025. Sunday's wave, smaller in scale, most intercepted, was a message. The IRGC statement made this explicit. This is a warning shot. If Israel responds or continues to strike Lebanon, the next phase will be more devastating and more comprehensive. Within hours of launching, Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi was on the phone with his Pakistani counterpart, then the Qataris, then Egypt, France, Britain, Turkey. That is not the schedule of a country trying to start a war. That is the schedule of a country that needed to fire something, and then immediately needs everyone to know it doesn't want to fire anything else. The equation Iran is trying to establish is very specific. We are not just a bilateral problem with Israel. We are now linking our restraint directly to Israel's behavior in Lebanon, which puts the United States in a difficult position, because Washington has been trying very hard to treat Lebanon as a separate file from the Iran nuclear negotiations. Iran has just formally said those files are the same file. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed, reopened, and threatened again across the last 18 months of this conflict. 20% of the world's oil passes through it. Inflation in Iran is north of 50%. The Israeli interceptor stockpile was so depleted during the 12-day war that the United States fired over 150 THAAD interceptors and 80 SM-3s, roughly 70% of all interceptors used in that war, to compensate. The United States has consumed approximately a quarter of its entire THAAD inventory in this conflict. None of that is replenished quickly. Meanwhile, 3 rounds of negotiations, Oman, Geneva, Islamabad, have either failed or been overtaken by military events. The Pakistani drafted memo that most recently appeared to offer a path forward is, as of this recording, in serious jeopardy because of Sunday's strikes. Iran has made a ceasefire in Lebanon a precondition for any agreement on its nuclear program. Israel has made clear, repeatedly and in practice, that it does not consider Lebanon part of the Iran ceasefire. These are not negotiating positions that split the difference easily. These are structural incompatibilities, and they have been present since June 2025, which is why there have now been 2 wars, 4 ceasefires, and a naval blockade. And we are still here. So, where does this go? Honestly, and I mean that, I don't know. Nobody does, as I record this. What I can tell you is what the data suggests about the conditions under which previous escalations have de-escalated. They have all involved some combination of Iran signaling through intermediaries that it has made its point, the United States applying direct and sustained pressure on Israel to halt a specific military action, and a mediating country, Qatar, Pakistan, Oman, providing a formula both sides can claim as a victory. All 3 of those conditions exist in some form right now. Iran is calling the Qataris. Trump is calling Netanyahu. Pakistan is still at the table. Whether any of that is sufficient depends almost entirely on whether Israel conducts further strikes on Lebanon in the next 48 hours. If it does, Iran has said, in fairly plain language, that it will respond with considerably more than a warning shot. If it doesn't, there is a version of this that becomes, once again, a fragile and contested diplomacy that the next military operation will shatter. We have been here before. We will very likely be here again. The ceasefire announced last week, the one that included a specific condition about not striking Beirut's southern suburbs, lasted 6 days. The one before it lasted until the Islamabad talks collapsed. The one before that was supposed to hold until February and didn't. There is, somewhere in this record, a lesson about the durability of agreements between parties who do not agree on what the agreement covers. I am Marcus Fenn. This is Borderlines, analysis from the edge. If this kind of analysis is worth having, subscribe and share it. The stories that actually require context tend not to find their audience on their own.